The show opens with what appears to be an earthquake or tremor affecting the Kinloch Bravo oil rig. A young, relatively inexperienced crew member, Baz Roberts, is playing a video game with a colleague. Just then, Rose Mason, a geologist who is also the representative of an oil company that owns the rig, Pictor, announces a new transfer rota. Baz, who is desperate to get off the rig, cracks a joke with Rose before expressing his hope to retain his seat on the departing chopper. Meanwhile, the leader of the crew, Magnus Macmillan, receives concerning news. Their inland operational headquarters isn't responding, leaving the arrival time of the helicopter uncertain. After the call, Rose enters his office to find him preoccupied with a confidential letter. Magnus informs Rose about a call from the heliport regarding a diversion. The news disrupts the leisure time of the crew. One crew member, Lech Longman, questions the need for the loud video game Baz is playing. Baz retorts that the isolated environment of the rig pushed him to divert his mind by playing video games. Next, Baz seeks out Alwyn Evans, an older and experienced crew member, to discuss a disciplinary issue. Unfortunately, Lech reveals that Baz has been unexpectedly bumped from the departing helicopter and will be staying on the rig for a few more days. Meanwhile, Fulmer Hamilton, the radio and communications officer, faces technical issues as he tries to reach Pictor. Magnus summons Fulmer to the briefing room. Meanwhile, Kat Braithwaite, the rig's medic, attempts to have a conversation on her computer, but is reminded that the group briefing is about to begin. As Lars Hutton, a crew member who's been stationed on the rig for a long time, approaches Baz, he learns that Baz has been replaced on the departing helicopter. Simultaneously, Magnus addresses the crew, informing them of a reported power failure on the nearby oil rig. This has caused helicopters in their sector to be diverted for evacuation purposes. Lech adds to the frustration by mentioning that the phone lines are down, preventing them from contacting their families to inform them of the change in plans. The crew is also confused about why Baz was bumped from the helicopter in favor of Fulmer. Rose clarifies the situation, explaining that the company requested an experienced radio operator to be released for a critical liaison meeting, and she selected Fulmer for the task. Baz objects, but Rose reminds him that Pictor's requirements supersede the helicopter rota due to contractual obligations. However, their conversation is abruptly interrupted as the lights begin to flicker. Taking charge of the situation, Magnus initiates blackout recovery procedures. Meanwhile, Fulmer receives alarming news. All the generators are down, and the battery backup has just kicked in. The situation worsens as they discover they cannot restart the oil digging well. Alwyn, venturing outside, notices a disturbing development. The rig's rails are shaking violently. Magnus reacts swiftly, instructing the crew to contact the standby vessel for potential assistance. Unfortunately, Fulmer's attempt to contact anyone is thwarted by a malfunctioning radio. The situation intensifies as Alwyn calls Magnus to report that the safety systems have activated due to a surge in pressure. With no other option, Magnus decisively orders Alwyn to shut down the rig. As power flickers back to life, Rose questions Magnus' urgency of the shutdown of the well. She doesn't want to lower the oil production quota. Alwyn receives instructions to send a crew to inspect the module. Rose remains unconvinced, arguing that the safety systems would have prevented any problems. Magnus, however, emphasizes the importance of adhering to protocol to avoid potential casualties. Elsewhere, Fulmer delivers a sobering update. While some power has been restored, the radio remains inoperable. Given the uncertainty, Magnus prioritizes the safety of the standby vessel, instructing them to take shelter until the cause of the incident is identified. Faced with the communication blackout, Magnus inquires about alternative methods of contacting the vessel. Fulmer suggests using flags and informs Magnus that the best reception for the satellite phone is on the helipad. Determined to investigate a possible connection to their operational base, Magnus volunteers to make the trek alone. However, Magnus observes a thick fog approaching in the distance, and soon afterwards, the rig is quickly enveloped by the dense mist. All the crew members rush back inside, as the possibility of any helicopter departures in such visibility becomes zero. He returns from the helipad, unsuccessful in getting the satellite phone to work. He relays the news to Fulmer, who confirms that internal communication is functioning but external channels are down. While Magnus ponders the possibility of a seismic event, Alwyn suggests they might be experiencing the Earth's retaliation for their drilling activities. Rose dismisses this theory, citing their safe distance from fault lines. Meanwhile, Fulmer seeks permission to check the communications tower. Rose expresses reservations due to the hazardous conditions, but Magnus makes a decision to send Baz up with Fulmer, despite Hutton's vehement objections about safety risks. Magnus defends his choice, highlighting the potential rewards of restoring communication versus the dangers of inaction. Hutton gives Baz the option to refuse, but the lure of regaining his helicopter seat proves too strong. Magnus even sweetens the deal by offering his own seat if Baz succeeds in fixing the issue. With determination, Baz begins the climb up the ladder, closely followed by Fulmer. When they reach the helipad, Fulmer works on the equipment while offering Baz an explanation why he was chosen instead of Baz. He reveals that Rose selected him for the task based on company orders. Baz counters that currying favor with Rose won't make a difference when cutbacks begin, a scenario Hutton believes is imminent. He claims that company representatives never stay for long, suggesting Rose will quickly move on to new opportunities, leaving Fulmer behind once again. Fulmer's anger flares, and he shoves Baz against the railing, demanding why Baz gets to decide who belongs. Relief washes over them as Fulmer successfully repairs the equipment. As Fulmer prepares to descend, Baz accidentally drops the voltmeter. Deciding to leave Baz behind, Fulmer makes his way down. Minutes later, the calm is shattered by a horrifying sight. Baz's body drops from the helipad and crashes on the ground. Magnus screams for help, and Rose rushes to the scene. Fulmer climbs down, claiming Baz was following him down. But Hutton confronts Fulmer, demanding the truth about what transpired. Kat quickly assesses Baz's condition and discovers he is still alive. The crew then springs into action to help him. Meanwhile, Magnus assigns Fulmer a critical task: establish communication with the shore at all costs. Rose presents Magnus with another alarming discovery: a complete loss of pressure in the oil digging pipelines. This incident appears to be part of a larger problem affecting other locations. With urgency, Magnus orders Fulmer to prioritize getting the pipelines back online. Inside the makeshift medical bay, Kat treats Baz's injuries while Lars reacts with emotional turmoil. Kat acknowledges her limitations. Baz's internal injuries are beyond their capabilities on the rig, and surgery is out of the question. Their role is to stabilize him and ensure his comfort until transfer is possible. Lars, overwhelmed by the situation, lashes out and storms out. Alwyn expresses hope that Lars will come to terms with the situation, but Kat remains skeptical. Faced with radio silence from the Coast Guard, Fulmer is overcome with despair. Rose offers words of comfort, reminding him that Baz's slip on the ascent should have been a warning sign. Fulmer confides in Rose about Baz's accusations regarding her loyalty to the company and potential layoffs. Rose reassures him with a kiss, placing no blame on him for the accident. Later that night, while nobody is watching over, Baz stirs and experiences a vision of what transpired underwater. Outside, Hutton confronts Magnus, demanding he take action to get Baz medical attention. He suggests contacting the Navy or securing a helicopter at any cost. Their exchange escalates into an argument, with Hutton placing blame on Magnus for ordering Baz to go up the tower. After Magnus walks away, Hutton stumbles upon the confidential letter that was addressed to Magnus. Alwyn observes the crew heading upwards and stays behind to speak with Kat about Hutton's erratic behavior. Meanwhile, Magnus expresses his concerns to Rose about venturing outside without confirmation of safety. He inquires about Fulmer's emotional state, acknowledging that even after years of working together, people can keep hidden depths. Magnus observes that critical situations reveal a person's true values and beliefs. Rose is surprised to learn about established procedures for getting stuck offshore. However, Magnus highlights a more pressing issue: the lack of work and purpose, leading the crew to dwell on what they're missing. Their conversation is cut short by news of a commotion on the Parasitic instigated by Hutton. Lars accuses Magnus and the crew of lying about the situation, claiming it's more than just fog and bad weather. He throws suspicion at Magnus, believing Baz was sent up the tower out of fear of something lurking beneath the rig. Hutton demands transparency from Magnus, urging him to reveal the truth. He then throws a wrench into the situation by revealing the contents of the confidential letter. Hutton begins to read the document aloud, learning about the planned decommission of several crew members on the rig. Magnus cuts him short, confirming their worst fears: Pictor is shutting down the entire field. Magnus explains the company's reasoning. They didn't want the news to trigger a mass exodus before they were prepared to initiate decommissioning. He assures the crew that his priority remains getting them home safely. As they look up, a startling sight disrupts the conversation: ash falling from the sky. With ash flying in the fog all around, a battered and gruesomely injured Baz climbs to the top and claims that something has started to happen. In the next scene, Baz opens his eyes in the clinic as Kat Braithwaite and Rose Mason stand near him. They are stunned to see a man who had just fallen several feet on mesh steel is talking normally. Suddenly, though, his demeanor changes, and he becomes ferocious when Kat tries to take a blood sample. As Rose and Kat struggle to restrain him, Baz is terrified, and he screams about a wave coming. At the manager's cabin, Magnus and Grant Dunlin, the safety officer, discuss the situation. Having been colleagues for over 2 decades, Dunlin feels betrayed that Magnus never alerted him about the decommissioning that's about to happen. Back in the clinic, Baz is awake, and he undoes the bandage on his arm. Miraculously, a wound where the bone and muscles were sticking out has almost healed. Coincidentally, Heather and Alwyn talk about Baz in the rec room, where Alwyn admits that he'd never thought that Baz would walk again. Suddenly, the crew spots the lights from a standby vessel out in the sea that's signaling to the rig. Lek heads out to the helipad to note down the signals. As Fulmer translates, the message is a pan, or possible assistance needed. Over and over again, the signal has also caught the eye of Hutton, who appears to be on cabin arrest as the crane operator, Easter, stands outside his cabin. As Alwyn narrates to Heather about the time when Lek almost froze to death in a crash 2 years earlier, Lek is already shivering on the helipad, covered in ashes and chilled to the bone. As for Baz, he's far from normal. His left eye that had been destroyed in the fall has healed and he seems physically mobile. Mentally, however, that's a different matter. Something is happening inside his body that makes him throw up his tooth filling. While Magnus, Rose, and Fulmer discuss the decommissioning, an issue that's been plaguing everyone, Kat rushes in to inform them that Baz is missing. Alwyn finds him in a cabin, making weird symbols against the window and talking nonsense. Meanwhile, Lek is freezing and needs to warm up, so he turns to the best way he knows how: alcohol. In an oil rig where the crew needs to be ready for any and every emergency, alcohol for recreational purposes isn't a usual item. So, Lek tiptoes into Kat's clinic and siphons off some rubbing alcohol. He takes a few swigs and steps into the shower. But when he takes his clothes off, weird things start to happen. His tattoos wash off in the water as his eyes, palms, and body start to bleed. Lek screams in pain as blood continues flowing out of his pores while Hutton makes his escape through the cabin window. Soon afterwards, Heather walks in with Lek's dinner to find him dead in the shower. The cause of his death remains unknown, but Dunlin finds Baz's fillings in his cabins. Agnes and Rose theorize that the ones who have been exposed to the ash in the air have been infected by the substance, and it's the substance's presence that's cleaning the bodies of objects it considers impurities. This explains why Baz's inorganic fillings came out, and why Lek's tattoos washed off. Additionally, it's quite possible that Lek died bleeding and clutching his stomach in pain because the substance in the ash was rejecting the rubbing alcohol he ingested. Spotting a torchlight on the deck, Alwyn and Fulmer go down to the deck, where the latter cuts his hand on the lifeboat door. Unbeknownst to the two, Hutton slips inside the cabin. He goes straight for the communications room and signals sauce to the standby vessel, a tactical mistake because the zero visibility will cause the standby vessel to crash into the rig. Fulmer returns after struggling with the door, and Magnus, Dunlin, Fulmer, and Rose confront Hutton in the radio room. A scuffle almost breaks out between Fulmer and him when Hutton makes pointed remarks about Fulmer and Rose's secret relationship. Thankfully, they are broken off by Magnus. Following this, Fulmer frantically signals the standby vehicle to change course to avoid colliding. When they remember that Alwyn is still down there, Magnus orders Alwyn to come back up, but the latter spots Baz on the deck and rushes to bring him to safety. Dunlin arrives just in time at the deck to see Baz choking Alwyn. Before he can step in, Alwyn spits water from his mouth and falls down, dead, as Baz escapes. Soon afterwards, a distorted Magnus pleads with Alwyn's lifeless body to stay with him as he performs CPR, but to no avail. Later, Rose informs Magnus that the particles inside the ash are living organisms that act like parasites that invade a host and drive out its impurities. Containment becomes another major concern that plagues the overwhelmed manager, who is already burdened with the issues of a stranded crew, broken communications, a shortage of food, and 2 dead crewmates. It's theorized that anyone who is exposed to the ash for a long period of time or who sustained cuts or injuries needs to be put under observation. A montage of a worried Fulmer flexing his injured hand plays, and then changes to a scene of Baz sitting on the stairs with mean coldness in his eyes. In the following scene, Baz screams as he begs for an answer from the voices that keep howling inside his head, and visions of him murdering Alwyn haunt him. Meanwhile, Rose is still vehemently supporting Pictor and doesn't yet wish to see the company that will be decommissioning her crewmates as villains. Apart from asserting that her goal is to make the change to take the company towards a greener future, Rose also decides that the best way to separate the infected from the ones who are not is by drawing blood and comparing it with the sample that had been drawn from Baz. Fulmer's hand wound puts him under suspicion, and his relationship with Rose is strained as well. Inside the rec room, situations worsen as Hutton keeps taunting the crew when Heather announces that the fog is clearing up. With the visibility improved, the crew notices smoke billowing from the Kinloch Charlie, indicating that the rig had caught fire or an explosion had happened. Fulmer walks in on Baz going through the medical reports inside the clinic, and the latter escapes with his blood sample before either Fulmer or Rose can apprehend him. In the briefing room, it's decided that the deck areas shall be cleaned as the fog has moved away, and the ash stopped flying. 2 teams of 3 members each are assembled as a search party and are tasked with looking for Baz. He is seen in the production module, where he disposes of his blood sample into the sea, and as if all the events haven't been weird enough, Baz waves his hands over canisters of oil, and miniature plants start forming over the surface. Elsewhere, Rose discovers that the ash particles are 300 million years old, and belong to the Permian period, and it's the same oil that Pictor Energy has been drilling into all this time. Interestingly, the Permian period caused a massive extinction of 95% of all living organisms on Earth, and it's known as the Great Dying. In the module, Hutton and Dunlin walk in to find Garrow wounded, another victim of Baz. But it turns out that Garrow has crossed over to the other side as he runs away into the darkness. Suddenly, a massive tremor begins that imbalances the crew and adds to the chaos. Heather is isolated from her group and is looking for her mates when she walks into an area where greenery is growing. An oil rig that stands in the middle of a sea has a portion inside it where all sorts of ferns, bushes, and grass are taking hold. While on her way, Heather suddenly comes face to face with Baz, joined in by Garrow, although neither of them seems harmful. Baz talks about having seen the landscape that existed millions of years ago, and how everything here is heading to its death. Unexpectedly, Hutton comes to Heather's rescue and flashes lights on the 2 men, a probable weakness of the ones who have turned, and helps Heather escape. No sooner than one issue is sorted out, another pops up on the rig, and this time, it's the ignition system, and it's a major one. The ignition system is responsible for burning off the harmful gases and substances that are released by the rig, and unless the system is functioning, the crewmates will be poisoned. Hutton comes up with an old-school solution for how a jammed ignition system used to be fixed back in the day, shooting a flare at it. Before straws can be drawn to select the person for the task, Fulmer volunteers, probably to prove to the crew that he's not joining Baz and Garrow yet, and maybe to earn back Rose's affection. Fulmer is primed into the position to shoot the flare from, but he's struck by sudden inspiration. He looks back at the crew and starts crossing the thin ledge, inching towards the ignition system so that he doesn't miss. He then shoots, and before he can even pick up speed, he's hit by the shockwave and falls down, unconscious. Rose is beside herself in terror as Kat starts treating him. Fortunately, he survives thanks to his fire-resistant jacket, although he does suffer some bad burns on his back and arms. He comes to his senses to find Rose watching him with concern in her eyes, and she admonishes him for his actions, though not too sternly. Inside the module, Baz finally understands that the well injection is the device that's harming the underwater entities, and he decides that the instrument has to be shut down. A montage of the injection reaching the depths of the ocean plays before cutting to black. Elsewhere, Baz and Garrow mess around with the well injection in order to undo its connection to the seafloor. Fulmer wakes up to find Rose sitting near him, and although he's badly burned, he'll live. Outside, Kat, Heather, and Rose discuss the parasites in the ash and come to the conclusion that it might be some bacteria that has managed to stay alive for millions of years, and it might be the ancestor of all life. Suddenly, Kat blurts out that she's pregnant, and it's like a bombshell to the other 2 women there. Inside the laboratory, Rose notes that the Spores might be using a method called quorum sensing to communicate with Baz. Quorum sensing is a physiological way by which the bacteria talk to each other, allowing them to coordinate and causing diseases in other organisms. In the meantime, Fulmer seems intent on drawing circular patterns, which are later revealed to be the same weird circles that Baz had been drawing on the window panes earlier. While this is happening, Magnus calls Dunlin and Rose to the control room, with Fulmer and Heather in their wake. As the pressure in the rig spirals out of control, the only option is to send a remote-operated vehicle to shut down the rig manually. After some intense deliberation, Easter is called in to operate the vehicle to the bottom of the sea when something on the seabed freaks them out. Concentric rings seem to have appeared around the pipe burrowed into the seafloor, and they seem strangely similar to the drawings that Fulmer and Baz have made. Even Fulmer stares intently into the circles. Inside the module, Baz and Garrow are at their wits' end, seeing the complexity of the well injector. They thus decide to call Fulmer to help with their objective, probably due to the fog clearing. The signal returns, and Rose starts looking up the samples of the bacteria when something called Project Siren comes up. Meanwhile, Kat contacts her wife, Casey, who informs her that the fog has flown in, and before she can warn her not to go outside, the signal drops again. Trying to access the files is a fruitless endeavor as Rose's security clearance proves insufficient for this new finding. If her highest level of security isn't enough to access these files, there might be something very abnormal happening. While looking up passwords that can be possible matches, Rose finds the drawings by Fulmer, and she chooses to stay quiet instead of alerting everyone. Meanwhile, despite being asked to establish contact with the beach, Fulmer starts looking up the ways circles can be used to communicate when he hears Baz speak to him. Later, Rose walks in on Fulmer, observing his wounds, which have already started healing. His burn scar on the wrist has already healed completely, so it's clear that the spores have seeped into his body. Fulmer mentions that he has started hearing and seeing Baz, and it's obvious that he's terrified. In the briefing room, multiple arguments break out as everyone wants to go back home. News that the fog has reached land sends everyone into panic mode, and the safety of their loved ones supersedes their need to stay together. Hutton picks a fight with Kat, and they almost come to blows when Heather screams to let go of her because she's pregnant. Seeing this, Magnus tries explaining that the safety of his crew matters the most to him, and that was the reason he didn't go home all those years back. But he trails off before being able to mention that's how his son died. Dunlin and Rose attend to him and send him off to get some much-needed rest, and Rose takes charge. She announces that she's with the crew and not picked her any longer. It seems the deaths of crewmates, an unknown bacterium attacking people, and being stranded in the middle of nowhere have helped Rose have a change of heart. She goes back to Fulmer's room but finds no trace of him, except a note where he expresses his concern for her safety, which is why he had to leave. With her world crumbling around her, Kat stands on the rails only to find Fulmer heading toward the production module. Kat and Rose run after him and enter the module to find greenery covering everything, and strange spores flying around. However, despite being considered harmful, the spores gather near Kat's stomach and approach her very gently. Rose takes Kat outside, and both women are shaken up but unharmed. As the story draws to an end, there's excitement on the deck as the crew spots light far away and get hopeful about a rescue mission coming for them. The old seafarer Murchison isn't very sure about it yet. The crew gets into their life jackets as they prepare to be taken away from the rig and all its problems. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave 1,000 likes or 100 comments if you'd like us to continue part 2. Thank you.